A young woman, frail after surviving a deadly illness, receives bread and milk at her doorstep every morning from a mysterious cowboy. Until, on the seventh day, he knocks and says, "I brought my heart too, if you'll take it." But that simple act hides a truth so dangerous it could cost them both their lives. Who is he really? Why did her fiancé die under suspicious circumstances? And what dark secret is the sheriff desperate to keep buried? Stay with us until the very end to uncover every twist, every revelation, and a love story born in the shadows of betrayal. We post the best stories every single day, so hit that subscribe button right now, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and leave us a like so more people can discover this incredible journey. The wind that morning carried the smell of dust and rain that never came. Emily Carter was halfway to the door when she saw him again, Daniel Hayes, the quiet cowboy who had been leaving bread and milk at her steps every morning for the past week. But this time, he didn't just place the crate down and turn away. He stood there, hat in hand, eyes fixed on her like a man with something heavy on his chest. "Your fiancé," he said, before she could greet him. His voice was steady, but there was something raw beneath it. "Jonathan, I was there when he died." The word struck her harder than any winter wind. For a second, she forgot how to breathe. She gripped the edge of the doorframe. "What did you say?" "I promised him I'd look after you." His jaw tightened as if the memory itself hurt to speak aloud. "And that's why I'm here. That's why I've been coming." 7 days of quiet gestures, of silent offerings at her doorstep, now painted in a darker, more tangled light. Her mind raced. Jonathan had died almost a year ago. She had never seen this man before last week. Daniel took a step closer. His boots crunched on the gravel. "But Emily, that's not the only thing you should know." A crow screeched somewhere beyond the fence, breaking the silence. Her pulse thudded in her ears. "Then say it." He looked at her for a long moment, eyes deep and unreadable. "Jonathan didn't die the way everyone thinks." The words echoed in her skull long after he spoke them. Emily stepped back, letting the screen door swing between them, its rusty hinges groaning. "You need to leave." Daniel didn't move. He shifted the crate forward. "Bread. Milk. Same as before." His voice was softer now. "And something else, if you'll take it." Her gaze dropped to his hands, empty except for the small crate. The something else was in his tone, in the unspoken weight that pressed the air between them. "You're not making sense," she said, though her voice trembled. "I don't know you." "You will," he replied. And for a second, there was the faintest curve at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile, but the ghost of one. The rest of the day moved in a haze. She tried to keep herself busy, scrubbing the old wooden table until her fingers ached, but his words kept replaying. Jonathan didn't die the way everyone thinks. That night she sat by the window, watching the dim lanterns of the neighboring ranch flicker miles away. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. She thought she saw movement by the fence, a shadow breaking the pale silver light of the moon. By the time she stepped outside, there was no one there, only the crate, untouched from the morning. She reached for it, and that's when she saw it. Tucked between the loaf of bread and the glass bottle was a folded piece of paper. The handwriting was rough but careful. "I owe you more than you know. But before I tell you everything, you need to be sure you want to hear it. There's danger in the truth, no signature." But she knew whose hand it was. She crushed the note in her palm and turned toward the dark horizon. Somewhere out there, Daniel Hayes was watching her reaction. She could feel it in the prickling of her skin, the same way one feels the moment before a storm breaks. The next morning she caught him before he could walk away. "What did you mean yesterday?" she demanded. Daniel adjusted his hat. "It's not something to say out here, too many ears." "You think I'm going to follow you somewhere?" His gaze didn't waver. "I think you're already curious enough to do it." She hated that he was right. They walked beyond the edge of her land, where the dry grass whispered against their boots. The air smelled of cedar and dust. Finally, beneath the shade of a twisted mesquite tree, he spoke. "I knew Jonathan from before you met him. We worked the same cattle drive once." His voice had a slow, deliberate cadence, as if each word was weighed before being released. "And the night he died, I wasn't the only one there." Her heart stuttered. "Then who was?" That's the part I'm not ready to tell you. Why? She snapped. Because once you know, you'll never be able to look at this town, or me, the same way again. A hawk's cry cut through the stillness. She felt the heat rise in her cheeks, not from the sun, but from the fury and fear tangling inside her. Do you think I'm too weak to hear it? She asked. Daniel stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. No. I think you're too smart to ask for it before you're ready to face what comes after. Before she could respond, the sharp clatter of hoofbeats echoed from the road. She turned to see a rider approaching fast. Sheriff Clay Dawson. Daniel's jaw set. We'll talk later. Emily's stomach twisted. The sheriff had no reason to ride this far out unless something was wrong. The sheriff pulled up hard, dust swirling around his horse's legs. His gaze swept from Emily to Daniel, and lingered on the cowboy longer than necessary. Morning, Miss Carter, he said, tipping his hat without warmth. Mind if I have a word with your visitor? Daniel didn't flinch. Whatever you've got to say, you can say it in front of her. The sheriff's lips tightened. That so? Then I'll make it quick. Folks are talking, Hayes. They're wondering why you've been sniffing around here every day. I'm bringing her food, Daniel said evenly. That's all. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. I think you're bringing her trouble. Emily's breath caught. She glanced at Daniel, but his face was unreadable. The sheriff turned his horse, throwing one last look over his shoulder. Careful, Miss Carter. Some debts aren't worth paying. When he was gone, the silence was heavy. Emily finally spoke. What debt is he talking about? Daniel looked at her, and there was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. A flicker of guilt and something darker. The kind that gets people killed. Emily's mind raced. If Daniel was telling the truth, her fiancé's death wasn't just an accident or a twist of fate. It was a thread in a much larger, more dangerous web. And she was already tangled in it. Emily barely slept that night. Every creak of the old house, every gust of wind against the shutters, seemed louder than usual. Daniel's last words from the day before, the kind that gets people killed, looped endlessly in her mind. By sunrise, she found herself staring out at the dirt road, half expecting the sight of his broad-shouldered frame coming up the path. But the road stayed empty, as if the day itself were holding its breath. She busied herself baking biscuits she didn't plan to eat, just to fill the silence. The smell of butter and flour reminded her of another morning, nearly a year ago, one that had ended with Jonathan's coffin being lowered into the ground. She had avoided thinking about the funeral for months, but now the memory unfolded in her mind with unsettling clarity. She saw the townsfolk, dressed in their stiff black clothes, whispering behind gloved hands. She remembered the sting of their eyes on her back, as if she were part of the scandal that had stolen Jonathan's life. And then, a detail she had never examined before. A man standing apart from the crowd, hat pulled low, watching the burial from under the shadow of a cypress tree. She hadn't noticed him clearly at the time, her grief too heavy, but now she could see the outline in her mind. Tall, broad, boots worn from the trail. Daniel Hayes. The realization sent a shiver through her. If he had been there that day, why hadn't he said anything? Why hadn't he approached her, offered condolences, explained who he was? She pressed her palms to the kitchen table, trying to steady herself. Was it possible he'd been watching her all this time, even before he ever brought bread and milk? The sound of a knock pulled her from her thoughts. It was Abigail Moore, her neighbor, the only person who visited without fear of being turned away. "You've been quiet lately," Abigail said as she stepped inside, her eyes scanning Emily's face. "Quiet even for you." Emily hesitated. "Do you remember the day of Jonathan's funeral?" Abigail's brows lifted. "Hard day to forget." "Do you remember a man, standing apart from the others, watching?" For a moment Abigail said nothing. She set her shawl down, her fingers tightening over the fabric. "Why are you asking?" "I think it was Daniel," Emily said. "He's been bringing me food. And he said he was there when Jonathan died." Abigail's gaze hardened. "Then you need to be careful." "What do you mean?" "There were whispers after Jonathan's death," Abigail said, lowering her voice. "Whispers about a fight, about money owed to the wrong people. If Daniel Hayes was there that night, then he knows more than he's telling you." Emily felt her chest tighten. "Are you saying you think he had something to do with it?" "I'm saying," Abigail replied, that sometimes the man offering help is the one who lit the fire in the first place. That afternoon, Daniel returned. No crate this time, just himself, walking up the path as if nothing had changed. Emily stepped outside before he could knock. "You were at Jonathan's funeral." His jaw flexed, but he didn't deny it. "I was." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you weren't ready to hear it," he said evenly. "And because I wasn't ready to explain why I was there. You keep deciding what I'm ready for," she snapped. "Tell me now." Daniel glanced toward the road, as if weighing whether they were being watched. "The funeral wasn't the first time I saw you, Emily. I'd seen you before, months before Jonathan's death." Her stomach dropped. "Where?" "In town. You were with him, laughing. He introduced you as his fiancée. I thought—" His voice trailed off. "I thought he'd finally found a reason to change his ways." Emily blinked. "Change his ways?" Daniel's eyes held hers, steady but heavy. "Jonathan wasn't the man you think he was." The air between them seemed to thin, every sound from the prairie falling away, until all she could hear was her own heartbeat. "What are you talking about?" Daniel's voice was low, as if each word could be dangerous. "The night he died, he was meeting someone who didn't plan for him to leave alive." Before she could press him further, the sound of hooves broke through the tension. This time it wasn't the sheriff, it was a stranger, riding hard, dust flying up behind him. The man reined in near the gate, calling out, "Hayes, we need to talk. Now!" Daniel's face darkened. He turned to Emily. "Go inside." But she didn't move. "Who is that?" The rider's gaze flicked to her, then back to Daniel. "She doesn't know yet, does she?" Daniel's shoulders stiffened. "Not here." The stranger dismounted, stepping closer, voice sharp. "You can't keep it from her forever. She deserves to know who pulled the trigger." Emily's breath caught. "Pulled the trigger?" Neither man answered. The rider shot Daniel a hard look. "You've got until sundown to tell her yourself. If you don't, I will." He mounted up again, spurring his horse into a gallop, leaving nothing but dust in his wake. Daniel didn't look at her. "Go inside, Emily." But she didn't move. "Who?" she demanded. "Who killed him?" Daniel's eyes lifted to hers, shadows in their depths. "Not yet." The words burned in her chest. Somewhere in this tangle of half-truths, the answer to Jonathan's death was waiting. But Daniel's refusal only sharpened her resolve. If he wouldn't tell her, she would find out herself. The stranger's words from the day before were still ringing in Emily's ears. She deserves to know who pulled the trigger. All night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing phantom hoofbeats in the wind. If Daniel was telling the truth, if he had been there when Jonathan died, then every moment she had spent with her fiancé had been built on half-seen shadows. By dawn, she knew she couldn't wait any longer. She wrapped her shawl tight and set off down the dirt road toward the east pasture, where she knew Daniel kept his horses. She found him tightening a saddle girth, his back to her. "You've run out of time," she said. Daniel didn't turn. "Morning to you, too." "I'm not playing this game, Hayes. Yesterday that man said you knew who killed Jonathan. If you've been protecting me, fine. But if you've been protecting them, I need to know now." He set the saddle knife down slowly, like a man bracing for a blow. "You think I'd protect a killer?" "I think you've been protecting someone," she shot back. "Maybe yourself." That made him turn. His gaze was steady, but there was something frayed beneath it. "I've been protecting the truth, Emily, because the truth doesn't just hurt. It burns everything it touches." "Then let it burn." A muscle in his jaw twitched. "The night Jonathan died, I was there. Not because I wanted to be, but because he sent for me." Emily blinked. "He sent for you?" "He owed a debt he couldn't pay," Daniel said. "The kind that draws blood if it's not settled. I'd been in trouble before, knew the kind of men he was dealing with. I thought maybe I could talk them down." Her pulse quickened. "So you met him?" Daniel nodded. It was late. The moon was just a sliver, enough to see his face. He looked scared. That wasn't like him. Emily bit back the instinct to defend Jonathan. She needed to hear it all. "And then?" "We talked. He said if anything happened, I was to make sure you were safe. That was his last clear sentence before the shooting started." The words hit her like a blow. He knew he was in danger?" Daniel's eyes softened, but his voice stayed low. "He knew more than danger, Emily. He knew someone wanted him dead. She swallowed hard. So you promised him? I promised him I'd keep you out of it, that I'd carry the weight for as long as I could. But you keep asking for pieces of it, and once I give you one, the rest will follow, whether you're ready or not. Emily took a step closer, her hands trembling. Then give me the rest. Daniel shook his head. Not yet. Why? Her voice rose. Because you think I'll hate you? Because you think I'll blame you? His answer was quiet, but sharp. Because once I tell you, you won't be able to look at anyone in this town the same way, not even yourself. Her breath caught. What does that mean? Daniel hesitated, then glanced toward the tree line, scanning for movement. His posture shifted, alert. We're not alone. A rustle came from the mesquite thicket. Emily turned, but Daniel's hand caught her arm. Don't look, he murmured. Whoever it is, they've been following you, not me. Her stomach dropped. Following me? Yes. Since before the funeral. Before she could speak, a twig snapped, and the sound of retreating footsteps faded into the brush. Daniel's hand stayed on her arm a moment too long, as if weighing whether to let go. Finally, he released her and stepped back. You need to stay inside tonight, he said. That evening, the wind howled through the eaves, carrying the smell of distant rain. Emily sat at her table, staring at the single lamp flame, listening for any sound beyond the walls. A knock came, not the soft, deliberate knock she'd grown used to from Daniel, but a frantic one. She opened the door to find Abigail, eyes wide, hair wind-blown. You need to hear this, she said. I went into town today. People are talking. They say the sheriff's been asking questions about you, about Jonathan's will. Emily's blood ran cold. His will? Abigail nodded. And about a certain cowboy who's been seen at your place every morning. Emily shut the door behind them, heart pounding. Why would the sheriff care about Daniel? Because if Daniel was there the night Jonathan died, Abigail said grimly, the sheriff might see him as a loose end. And loose ends don't live long in this town. Emily gripped the edge of the table. Abigail, Daniel says Jonathan asked him to protect me, but he won't tell me who killed him. Abigail hesitated, then lowered her voice. Maybe he's not telling you because he knows you'd go after them. Emily stared at her. And maybe I would. The knock came again, not frantic this time, but firm. Emily opened the door to see Daniel, rain misting his shoulders. His eyes swept over her, then Abigail. We need to talk, he said. Alone. Abigail's mouth tightened, but she took her shawl and left without a word. When the door closed, Daniel stepped forward, his voice low. I told you part of the truth this morning. Now I'll give you the rest, at least the part that won't get you killed. Emily's chest tightened. Go on. He met her eyes, and for the first time since she'd met him, there was no guarded wall in his expression, only a raw, unfiltered weight. The man who shot Jonathan wasn't a stranger, Emily. He was someone you've spoken to since. Her heart hammered. Every conversation she'd had in the past year flashed through her mind, faces of neighbors, shopkeepers, the pastor, even the sheriff. Which of them had looked her in the eye with blood on their hands? The words hung between them like a noose. He was someone you've spoken to since. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Who? Daniel's eyes flicked toward the window, as if the walls themselves had ears. I can't say, not yet. Saying his name out loud is as good as handing him a gun. Her fists clenched. You think keeping me in the dark makes me safer? I know it does, he said, his voice low but firm. You've been talking to this man, Emily, looking him in the eye. If he even suspects you know the truth, she cut him off. Then you'd better tell me before I say it to the wrong face. Daniel stepped back, the tension in his jaw hard as stone. There's a reason Jonathan trusted me with this instead of you. He knew you'd go looking for justice, and justice in this town doesn't come clean. Emily wanted to scream. So what am I supposed to do? Sit here and wait for you to decide when I can know what happened? His gaze didn't soften. Yes, if it keeps you alive. Before she could answer, a sharp rattle against the door made them both turn. Daniel's hand went instinctively to the revolver at his hip. Emily opened the door cautiously, but there was no one on the porch, only a small object lying at the threshold. A bullet. Her blood went cold. Daniel picked it up, turning it between his fingers. There was something etched into the casing, a single letter. C. "What does that mean?" Emily whispered. Daniel's expression darkened. "It means someone wants you to know this is personal." She looked at him sharply. "Does it stand for the man you're protecting me from?" His silence was answer enough. That night Emily couldn't sleep. The bullet sat on the table, gleaming in the lamplight like a silent threat. Daniel stayed outside, leaning against the porch post, watching the dark yard, as if he expected someone to step out of it. When the clock neared midnight, he came back inside. "I'll be back before sunrise," he said. "Where are you going?" "To make sure whoever left that bullet knows they've been seen." Emily caught his sleeve before he could step out again. "If you won't tell me the name, at least tell me if it's someone I trust." His pause lasted just long enough to twist her stomach into knots. "You think you trust him?" The next morning she woke to find Daniel already back, his eyes bloodshot, dust clinging to his coat. "I saw him," he said simply. "He knows I'm watching now." Before she could press him for more, a knock came, this time in broad daylight. She opened the door to Sheriff Clay Dawson. "Morning, Miss Carter," he said, tipping his hat. "I hear you've had an unexpected visitor lately." Emily's throat tightened. "If you mean Daniel, he's been helping me." The sheriff's gaze lingered on her longer than was polite. "Helping, is that what we're calling it? I'd be careful who I let on my porch." Daniel stepped into view from behind her. "She's fine with me here." The sheriff's mouth twitched into something like a smile, though it never reached his eyes. "That's so. Well, you tell your friend that trouble's got a way of sticking to a man like him." After the sheriff left, Emily turned to Daniel. "Why do I feel like he knows exactly what's going on?" Daniel's eyes hardened. "Because he probably does." Emily's breath hitched. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying stop asking before you force me to confirm something we can't take back," Daniel interrupted, his tone sharper than she'd ever heard it. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Emily tried to keep busy, but every time she looked at that bullet on the table, her mind went back to the sheriff's eyes, calm, steady, and utterly unreadable. As dusk fell, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. She was about to light the lamp when she noticed something at the far end of the porch, a folded scrap of paper weighed down by a small stone. She stepped outside, her heartbeat quickening, and picked it up. The handwriting was jagged, rushed. "Stop asking questions about Jonathan. Or the next bullet won't be a message." There was no signature, but at the bottom, faint and smudged, was the same single letter. C. She gripped the note so tightly it crumpled in her hand. When she turned, Daniel was already in the doorway, his expression a storm. "They're done warning you," he said. Emily swallowed. "So what now?" Daniel's eyes didn't leave hers. "Now, you decide how much you're willing to risk to know the name." The lamplight flickered, casting long shadows across the room. Emily realized she had already made her choice, though she hadn't spoken it aloud, and it would lead her straight into the fire. The wind had a strange edge to it that evening, hot, restless, carrying the scent of something sharp and metallic. Emily noticed it while fastening the shutters, the sky outside a deep bruised red as the sun bled into the horizon. Daniel was pacing the porch, boots thudding softly against the wood, scanning the empty road like a man expecting trouble. "You're making me nervous," she called from the doorway. "Good," he said without looking at her. "Nervous keeps you alive." She didn't sleep that night. She sat by the kitchen window, watching the moon climb above the dark shapes of the mesquite trees. The bullet from the day before was still on the table, glinting in the lamplight. Every few minutes, Daniel would pass by outside, a shadow moving back and forth. It was nearly midnight when the first crackle reached her ears, faint at first, almost like leaves rustling, but then the smell hit, acrid, biting, undeniable. Smoke. Emily shot to her feet. "Daniel!" He was already at the door, rifle in hand. "Stay inside!" But she didn't listen. When she stepped onto the porch, she saw it, orange tongues of flame licking up the side of the barn, spreading fast through the dry wood. Sparks leapt into the wind, carried toward the house. Daniel cursed, shoving his rifle into her hands. "If anyone comes near, you aim and pull the trigger. Don't think, just pull." He grabbed a bucket and ran toward the well, but the wind was against him. The flames roared higher, heat searing the night air. "Daniel!" she called, but he didn't turn. Then she saw movement in the shadows beyond the barn, 2 figures slipping away into the brush. Her heart slammed against her ribs. They hadn't just set the fire, they'd stayed to watch it burn. One of them turned back just enough for the firelight to catch a glimpse of his face. She couldn't make out the features, but she saw the glint of something metallic at his chest. Maybe a badge. The sheriff's warning from days before flashed in her mind. Some debts aren't worth paying. Daniel managed to beat back enough of the flames to keep them from reaching the house, but the barn was a blackened ruin by the time the fire died. Smoke hung low, clinging to their clothes, their hair, their skin. When he finally stumbled back toward the porch, he was limping, his shirt torn at the shoulder and soaked dark with blood. Emily dropped the rifle and ran to him. "You're hurt. Sit down now." He tried to wave her off, but his legs gave out at the top step, and she caught him just in time to keep him from falling. Inside, she eased him into the chair by the table. The wound was high on his arm, deep, ugly, but not enough to kill him. She fetched a basin of water, her hands trembling as she tore away the rest of his sleeve. The lamplight revealed more than just the fresh injury. Scars, old ones, crisscrossed his skin, pale and raised against the tan. Some were from blades, others from bullets. "How many times have you been shot?" she asked, voice thin. He didn't answer. His eyes were hazy, the fight in him drained for the moment. "You've been in trouble like this before," she said softly. "Haven't you?" His gaze flicked to hers, heavy-lidded. "I told you. Trouble sticks to me." She cleaned the wound as best she could, binding it tight with a strip of clean cloth. His skin was hot under her fingers, too hot. "You're burning up," she murmured. "It's nothing. It's not nothing. You've lost blood." He tried to sit up straighter, but the effort pulled a sharp breath from him. "Emily." His voice faltered, his eyelids heavy. "You need to rest," she said, but his hand caught her wrist before she could step away. The pressure of his grip wasn't strong, but it stopped her cold. "There's something," he murmured, voice unsteady. "You have to know about that night." Her heart pounded. "Then tell me." His gaze wavered, unfocused. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that. I was trying to—" He winced, jaw clenching against the pain. "The one who fired the first shot?" Emily leaned closer, straining to hear. "Who, Daniel? Say it." But his eyes slipped shut, his head tipping back against the chair. His hand went slack, releasing her wrist. "Daniel!" She shook his shoulder, but he was already drifting, caught somewhere between consciousness and fever. Outside, the wind had gone still, leaving only the smell of smoke and the distant crack of a lone coyote. Emily sat back, the unanswered question burning hotter than the fire that had taken her barn. The man she trusted most was lying unconscious, the name of her fiancé's killer caught somewhere on his lips, and she knew, if he didn't wake soon, someone else might make sure she never heard it. The night crawled by in a blur of shadows and lamplight. Emily stayed at Daniel's side, changing the bandage twice as the blood seeped through, keeping a cool cloth on his forehead. His skin burned under her touch, fever rising. She had heard of men in fever sleep speaking truths they'd never utter awake. She found herself leaning closer, straining for any whisper, but all he muttered were broken fragments, her name, Jonathan's name, and words she couldn't piece together. By dawn, his breathing had steadied, but he was still too pale. Emily stepped out onto the porch to fetch more water from the barrel, the early light staining the horizon a deep orange. She paused when she saw it, fresh hoofprints in the dirt leading up toward the back fence. Whoever had been here last night hadn't come for the fire alone. When she returned inside, Daniel was stirring. His eyes opened slowly, and for a moment he looked at her as if he wasn't sure she was real. "You stayed," he rasped. "I wasn't about to let you die in that chair," she said, setting the water beside him. "Now you need to tell me what you were trying to say before you passed out." He took a sip, his hand trembling slightly as he set the cup down. "If I do, there's no going back for you. I crossed that line the moment you told me Jonathan didn't die the way people think." Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the floor. "The man who killed Jonathan?" His jaw tightened. "It was Sheriff Clay Dawson." The name hit her like a blow to the chest. "That's—" She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Daniel looked up at her then, his gaze steady. I saw him. I was standing 10 feet away when it happened. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Why? Why would the sheriff kill him? That's the part I don't know for sure, Daniel admitted. But I do know Jonathan owed money, more than I could pay for him. Dawson wasn't just the law in this town. He had his hands in things that didn't belong to him. He used that badge to settle scores. Emily sat back, the room tilting around her. Every encounter she'd had with the sheriff over the past year replayed in her mind. The way his eyes lingered too long, the measured tone of his warnings, the hint of something unspoken. Daniel's voice cut through her thoughts. The bullet they left you, the letter C carved into the casing. It's not a threat from a stranger, it's his mark. He's letting you know he's watching. A chill slid down her spine. And the fire, meant to send a message. You're getting too close. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Emily straightened, resolve hardening in her chest. We have to do something. Daniel shook his head. If you go after Dawson, you won't just be fighting him, you'll be fighting every man in his pocket. You'd never see it coming when the shot finds you. I can't just stay silent. You can, Daniel said, his voice low, and you will, until I say otherwise. I've kept you alive this long, and I'm not about to let you throw it away now. She wanted to argue, but the knock at the door silenced her. Not the sharp, commanding knock of the sheriff, but slow, deliberate, 3 times, each heavier than the last. Daniel motioned for her to stay put, and reached for his revolver, wincing at the pull in his injured arm. He eased the door open just enough to see who stood outside. Abigail Moore. Her eyes darted past Daniel to Emily. I heard about the fire, she said quickly. But that's not why I'm here. There's talk in town. Dawson's planning something. He's been seen with 2 riders who aren't from around here. Daniel's expression darkened. Bounty men? Abigail hesitated. I don't know. But whatever it is, it's coming fast. After she left, Emily turned to Daniel. We can't wait for him to make the next move. He leaned back against the table, his face drawn but determined. You're right, which is why you're going to stay here, out of sight, while I deal with it. No, she said firmly. If he's coming after me, I have a right to be ready. Daniel's mouth twitched in something between frustration and reluctant respect. Then you'd better start learning how to use that rifle properly. They spent the next hour in the yard, Daniel showing her how to hold the stock against her shoulder, how to line up the sight, how to breathe before squeezing the trigger. The lessons were short. He tired easily, the wound slowing him. But his voice was steady, precise. By the time the sun was high, Emily could hit the old fence post at 50 yards. Daniel didn't say it, but the faint nod he gave her felt like approval. Inside, as she set the rifle against the wall, Daniel caught her wrist gently. Emily, if Dawson makes his move, you can't hesitate. Don't think about who he is. Just think about what he's done. Her throat tightened, but she nodded. That night, the air felt heavy, thick, with the promise of something about to break. Daniel stayed by the window, watching the road. Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the rifle within arm's reach. Somewhere in the dark, a horse whinnied, close. Then came the sound of boots on the porch boards. Daniel's hand went to his gun. He glanced at her, his expression a silent command. Stay put. The doorknob turned slowly, then stopped. A voice, low and cold, slid through the gap in the door. You've been asking questions, Miss Carter. It's time you learned the price. Her heart pounded as the voice lingered like smoke in the air. She knew it instantly. And now, knowing the truth, the sound of it was enough to chill her blood. Sheriff Clay Dawson was here. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was Emily's heartbeat pounding in her ears. She could see Daniel's silhouette in the lamplight, his body angled toward the door, revolver steady in his hand. Dawson, Daniel said evenly, voice cold as winter. You're trespassing. The sheriff's low chuckle drifted through the half-open door. You know how it is, Hayes. Lawmen can go wherever the law needs them to be. This isn't the law, Daniel replied. This is intimidation. Call it what you want, Dawson said, his tone easy but edged with steel. But I hear you've been filling Miss Carter's head with dangerous ideas. I'd hate for her to start thinking she can live without my Protection. Emily's skin prickled at the word. She took a step toward the door, but Daniel's hand shot back, palm open, a silent warning to stay put. "What do you want?" Daniel asked. "To give you a choice," Dawson said. "You leave town before sundown tomorrow, and this little arrangement of ours stays quiet. Or you stay, and I make sure both you and the lady here regret it." Daniel's voice didn't waver. "I'm not leaving." A beat of silence. Then the sheriff's tone dropped, colder than before. "Then I'll see you soon." The sound of boots on wood retreated, followed by the heavy clop of hooves fading into the night. Daniel locked the door, checking each window before turning to Emily. "He's making his move sooner than I thought." Emily swallowed hard. "And if you'd taken his deal, I'd be dead before I reached the county line," Daniel said flatly. Before either of them could say more, a knock came at the back door, quick, urgent. Emily froze. "That can't be—" "It's Abigail," Daniel said after a glance through the curtain. He let her in and the neighbor stepped inside, eyes darting between them. "I just came from town," she said in a rush. "Dawson's been talking to a couple of men who don't belong here, gunmen. They're not hiding what they're here for." Daniel's expression darkened. "Bounty men. I figured as much." Abigail looked straight at Emily. "You need to hear something, and you need to hear it now. Daniel isn't just some cowboy who happened to be there the night Jonathan died. He's been on Dawson's list for years, since long before you met him." Emily turned to Daniel, stunned. "What is she talking about?" Daniel's jaw tightened, but Abigail didn't wait for his answer. "Years ago, Dawson accused him of stealing from the cattle drives, money and stock both. The charges didn't stick, but it didn't matter. Around here, once Dawson marks you, you're guilty in the eyes of every man who tips his hat to him. Daniel's been living with that target ever since." Emily's voice shook. "And you still stayed here, knowing he'd eventually come for you again?" Daniel's eyes found hers steady. "I stayed because of you, because Jonathan asked me to." Abigail's tone softened, but only slightly. "If Dawson's bringing in hired guns, it means he's not planning to let this drag out. He wants it done, clean, fast, and without anyone in town asking questions." Daniel nodded once. "Then we need to be ready before nightfall tomorrow." They spent the day preparing, checking ammunition, boarding up the weakest spots on the porch railing, laying out water and supplies in case they had to hole up for days. Emily's hands ached from hammering nails, but she forced herself to keep going. In the late afternoon, Daniel caught her at the well, filling buckets. "Emily," he said quietly, "if this goes bad, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "That you'll run, no matter what happens to me." She shook her head immediately. "I'm not leaving you." "You might have to," he said, and there was no argument in his tone, only a grim certainty. That night, as the first stars emerged, the yard grew eerily still. No crickets, no wind. Emily sat at the table, rifle close at hand. Daniel stood by the window, watching the tree line. When the knock came, it wasn't on the door. It was on the glass of the front window, 3 slow taps that sent a shiver down her spine. Daniel raised his revolver. "Stay behind me." A shadow shifted outside, and then a voice, deep, unfamiliar, called, "We can do this easy, Hayes. Step outside and we leave the lady be." Daniel's answer was immediate. "Not happening." The voice chuckled. "Then we do it Dawson's way." Footsteps crunched in the dirt, moving away, and Daniel swore under his breath. "They're circling." Emily's grip tightened on the rifle. "How many?" "At least 3, Daniel said, "maybe 4, and Dawson will be watching from somewhere close." She felt the weight of Abigail's words settle over her. He's been on Dawson's list for years. Somewhere out in the dark, a match struck, its brief flare revealing the glint of a revolver barrel. Then the light died, leaving only the pounding of her heart. The next sound was the unmistakable creak of the back porch boards. Whoever was coming hadn't come to talk, and for the first time, Emily realized this fight might not end with both of them alive. The boards on the back porch groaned again, followed by the faint scrape of metal against wood. Emily's pulse roared in her ears. Daniel's eyes met hers for half a heartbeat, a silent command to stay calm, before he moved to the corner of the room, revolver drawn. The next sound came not from the porch, but the front of the house, footsteps, fast and deliberate. They were being surrounded. Daniel's voice was barely above a whisper. "They're trying to box us in." Emily's grip tightened on the rifle. "What do we do?" "We move, now." He grabbed the small leather satchel already prepared by the door, water, ammunition, a folded map, and slung it over his good shoulder. "Out the cellar. Keep low and stay right behind me." They moved quickly, Daniel keeping his injured arm close to his side as he lifted the cellar hatch. Cold earth-smelling air rushed up to meet them. Emily followed him down the wooden steps, her knees trembling, the sound of booted feet above their heads echoing through the floorboards. They slipped out through the rear cellar door, the moonlight barely touching the ground. Daniel led her toward the tree line, every step quick but quiet. They were almost to the cover of the mesquite when a gunshot split the night. Bark exploded from a trunk inches from Emily's head. She ducked instinctively, heart in her throat. "Run!" Daniel barked, shoving her forward. They broke into a sprint, weaving between trees. More shots rang out, the sharp cracks echoing off the dry earth. Emily's breath burned in her chest, but she didn't slow. A voice carried on the wind behind them, taunting, confident. "You can't run forever, Hayes." Daniel didn't answer, but his jaw was set like stone. They reached a narrow, dry creek bed, its sides steep enough to offer some cover. Daniel dropped into it, pulling Emily down after him. "Catch your breath," he murmured, crouching low. "We'll follow this east. Should give us a mile or two before they can cut us off." Emily nodded, her hands shaking as she tried to steady the rifle. In the faint moonlight she could see the sweat on Daniel's brow, the tightness in his expression as he scanned the ridge above. They moved along the creek bed for what felt like forever, each footstep muffled in the soft sand. The gunfire had stopped, but Emily knew that didn't mean the danger was over. The creek bed widened into a shallow bend, and that's when she heard it. Hoofbeats. Fast. Closing in. Daniel swore under his breath. They guessed our route. 2 riders appeared on the ridge above, their silhouettes stark against the night sky. One dismounted, rifle in hand, and dropped into the creek bed ahead of them. The other stayed mounted, circling wide. Daniel raised his revolver, firing twice. The man on foot dove behind a boulder, returning fire. "Emily, go!" Daniel shouted. "Up the bank, now!" She scrambled up the dirt slope, slipping on loose rocks, the rifle clutched tight. When she reached the top, she turned back to see Daniel holding his ground, firing again and again to keep the gunman pinned. But then a third shot rang out from somewhere in the dark. Daniel staggered, the force driving him back against the creek wall. "Daniel!" she cried. But before she could move toward him, strong arms grabbed her from behind. A rough voice hissed in her ear. "Time to finish this." She kicked and twisted, but the man was bigger, stronger. He yanked the rifle from her hands and shoved her toward a waiting horse. Through the chaos, she saw Daniel still on his feet, struggling toward her despite the hit. But another rider cut between them, forcing him back. The man holding her swung into the saddle and hauled her up in front of him. The horse surged forward, the pounding of hooves drowning out everything else. She caught one last glimpse of Daniel, gun in hand, teeth clenched in fury, before the darkness swallowed him. They rode hard, the wind whipping past her face, the stranger's arm a steel band around her. Emily fought the urge to cry out. Every sound might tell Daniel where she was, but it would also draw the men hunting him straight to his position. The rider didn't speak until they were well clear of the creek bed. "Dawson wants a word with you," he said, voice low and cold, "and you're going to listen." Her stomach turned to ice. Back in the trees, Daniel pressed a hand to his side, blood seeping through his shirt. He forced himself upright, his mind on one thing only, finding her before Dawson did. He knew she wouldn't go quietly, not for long. And when she fought, they'd hurt her for it. Somewhere ahead, Emily was being dragged toward the man who had murdered her fiancé. And Daniel, wounded and outnumbered, would have to cross half the county before the trail went cold. Emily's wrists burned from the rope binding them as the horse jolted over the uneven trail. The night air was sharp, filled with the scent of pine and dust. Every hoofbeat took her farther from Daniel and closer to the man whose name she could barely bring herself to say. They broke from the trees into a clearing, where a dim lantern light spilled from the open doors of an old line shack. 2 more horses were tied out front. Her captor swung down and hauled her to the ground. "Walk," he ordered, shoving her toward the shack. Inside, the air was thick with stale tobacco smoke. Sheriff Clay Dawson sat at a rough wooden table, his hat tipped back, boots stretched out. His badge caught the lantern light as his eyes swept over her, slow and deliberate. "Miss Carter," he drawled, as if greeting an old friend. "You've been busy." Emily straightened her shoulders despite the rope biting into her skin. "You set my barn on fire. You left that bullet." His mouth curved into a slow smile. "I've done a lot of things, sweetheart. But you seem to have it in your head that I killed Jonathan." Her jaw tightened. "Daniel saw you." Dawson leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Is that what he told you? That he was some kind of witness? Let me tell you something about your cowboy. He's got a talent for showing up at the wrong time and making it look like he's the hero." Emily's pulse pounded, but she didn't speak. "You think Jonathan was the man you were going to marry?" Dawson continued, his voice slow, almost lazy. "Truth is, he was neck-deep in trouble before you ever put on that engagement ring. Gambling debts, stolen cattle, and not just mine. He was working with Daniel, Miss Carter. Both of them profited, until the night they didn't." It was a lie. It had to be. But Dawson's calm delivery made it slide into her mind like a splinter. "You're twisting this," she said, though her voice wasn't as steady as she wanted. Dawson's smile deepened. "Am I? Ask yourself why Daniel never told you everything. Ask yourself what a man like him gains by keeping you close." She swallowed hard, trying to steady her breathing. "If you didn't kill Jonathan, who did?" The sheriff's eyes narrowed slightly, as though weighing how much to say. "I didn't pull the trigger, but I didn't stop it either. Sometimes the law turns a blind eye when it's convenient." He leaned back in his chair. "The question you ought to be asking isn't who fired the shot. It's why Daniel wants you to think it was me." Miles away, Daniel was riding hard through the night, every jolt of the saddle sending pain through his wounded side. He'd followed the tracks from the creek bed into the hills, where the trail split in 3 directions. He dismounted to study the ground, his lantern shielded from view. Fresh prints, deeper than the others, one rider carrying extra weight. Emily. He mounted again, teeth gritted, and pressed the horse into a gallop. Each moment that passed put her further under Dawson's control, and he knew the sheriff wouldn't waste time turning her mind against him. Back in the shack, Dawson stood and walked slowly around the table toward her. "You've been living in a story, Miss Carter," he said softly. "The innocent widow-to-be, the noble cowboy protector. But life out here doesn't work that way. You think Daniel's your salvation? He's just another man trying to settle his own debts, using you as the excuse." Emily met his gaze, refusing to look away. "You can say whatever you want. I know who Daniel is." Dawson chuckled, low and cold. "Do you? Ask him where he was the night before Jonathan died. Ask him why Jonathan was holding a letter with Daniel's name on it when I found him." She felt a flicker of doubt, small but sharp. Dawson saw it and pressed harder. "You think I'm the villain here. Maybe I am. But you ought to remember. Villains tell the truth when it serves them. Heroes, they lie because they can't afford not to." The door creaked open behind them, and one of the riders stepped in. "Tracks on the ridge," he said. "Could be Hayes." Dawson's mouth curved in satisfaction. "Good. Let him come. I've been waiting for this a long time." Daniel saw the faint glow of the shack's lantern through the trees. He dismounted, tying the horse in the shadows, and checked his revolver. His wound throbbed with every movement, but he pushed it aside. He'd get her out, one way or another. From inside, Dawson's voice carried faintly through the open window. "When he gets here, you're going to see the truth for yourself, Miss Carter. And when you do, you'll walk out of here with me." Emily's voice was quiet but firm. "You don't know me as well as you think." Outside, Daniel's shadow moved silently toward the shack, unaware that Dawson's men were already circling behind him. Inside, Emily braced herself for the moment the past and present would collide, and for the truth that might destroy them both. Daniel moved through the trees like a shadow, every step deliberate despite the pain tearing at his side. The shack's lantern light spilled weakly across the clearing, casting long, shifting shadows. He could see 2 men outside, one by the horses, the other pacing the far side. Dawson wasn't careless. They were posted to catch him coming or going. He waited, counting breaths until the pacing man turned away. Then Daniel slipped toward the shack's side wall, keeping low. Inside he could hear Dawson's voice, measured, calm, but with the weight of someone who believed he had already won. "You'll see soon enough, Miss Carter," Dawson was saying. "When Hayes walks in here with blood on his hands, you'll know exactly who he is." Emily's voice followed, steady but laced with steel. "If he comes for me, it won't be with blood. It'll be with the truth." Daniel moved to the window, catching sight of her. She was seated in a rough wooden chair, her wrists bound, chin lifted defiantly. Dawson stood only a few feet away, one hand resting on the butt of his revolver. The sight of her there, ropes cutting into her skin, eyes bright in the lamplight, burned through the pain in Daniel's side. He wasn't leaving without her. The door guard stepped inside to report, and Daniel used the moment. He slipped through the window, landing silently on the dirt floor behind a stack of crates. Dawson glanced toward the doorway. "Where is he?" "Couldn't find him," the guard said. "But the tracks lead here. He's close." "Oh, he's here," Dawson said with a faint smile. "He's just too smart to walk in the front." Daniel stepped out from behind the crates, revolver raised. "Smarter than you, maybe, but not dumb enough to leave her with you." Dawson's hand twitched toward his gun, but he didn't draw. "Evening, Hayes. I was just telling Miss Carter the truth about you." "That'd be a first for you," Daniel replied. Emily's eyes found him. "Daniel." "Hold on," he said, moving toward her without taking his eyes off Dawson. The sheriff's smile was slow, almost indulgent. "You want to save her, you'll have to kill me in front of her. That's the only way this ends." Daniel's voice was like steel. "Not the only way." The guard by the door shifted, and the movement was enough to spark chaos. Dawson went for his revolver. Daniel fired first, the shot shattering Dawson's lamp and plunging the room into darkness. Emily dropped to the floor as Daniel lunged forward, cutting her ropes with his pocket knife. "Go!" he hissed. But Dawson wasn't down. The muzzle flash lit his face for an instant as he fired, the bullet grazing Daniel's shoulder and spinning him back. Emily caught his arm, pulling him toward the door. They made it outside, but the second guard was already moving in. Daniel swung the butt of his revolver into the man's jaw, dropping him cold. They reached the tree line just as hoofbeats thundered behind them. Dawson burst from the shack, gun raised. "You run now, Hayes, and I'll follow you to the end of the earth," he roared. Daniel turned, breath ragged. "You already tried that. You lost." He fired once. The shot hit Dawson's gun arm, sending the revolver spinning into the dirt. The sheriff staggered but didn't fall. His glare followed them into the dark until the trees swallowed the clearing. They rode hard, neither speaking, until the first light of dawn crept over the horizon. When they finally slowed by a quiet stretch of river, Daniel swung down from the saddle with a wince. Emily was off her horse in an instant. "Sit. Now." He sank onto the grass, watching her tear a strip from her skirt to bind his wound. "You should have told me," she said softly. "I was trying to keep you clear of it," he replied. "Jonathan asked me to protect you. I thought that meant keeping you from knowing just how ugly it all was." Her hands stilled, but she didn't pull away. "And the rest of it? The way you've been here every morning with bread and milk?" Daniel's eyes held hers, unguarded. "I told you I brought something else, if you'd take it. I meant it then, and I mean it now. Emily, I brought my heart too." For a long moment, neither moved. The river whispered over the stones, the morning air cool against their skin. Emily finally let out a slow breath. "You almost got yourself killed keeping me safe." "Almost," he said, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. "But I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to." She sat beside him, leaning into his good shoulder. "Then stay. Not because of Jonathan, not because of promises, because you want to." Daniel's arm came around her, gentle but certain. "That's the only reason I've been here all along." Far off, the sound of hoofbeats echoed faintly through the hills. Dawson's men, still searching. But for the moment, they were just two souls by the river, bound not by fear, but by the choice to stay and face whatever came next. The danger wasn't gone, but neither was the promise. And Emily knew that whatever lay ahead, Daniel had already given her the one thing no enemy could take: his heart. Sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you isn't safety, it's the truth. Emily learned that love isn't about promises made in the light, it's about the ones kept in the dark when no one else is watching. Daniel brought bread milk, and his heart. And in the end, that was what saved them both. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the incredible tales we share every single day. Drop a comment telling us what part touched you the most, and don't forget to leave a like so more people can experience this unforgettable journey.